It was a typical Tuesday evening when everything changed. I had just returned home from work, my mind still cluttered with meetings and deadlines. The familiar scent of dinner wafted through the air, a comforting reminder of Melissa's presence. As I walked into our modest living room, I noticed the soft glow of the lamp illuminating her favorite chair. She was probably lost in a book, as she often was. As I kicked off my shoes and tossed my keys on the kitchen counter, I felt an inexplicable sense of unease settle over me. I couldn't quite place it, but something felt off. Perhaps it was the late nights she had been keeping recently or the way her laughter seemed to ring with an unfamiliar lightness. I brushed it aside, chalking it up to my overactive imagination. That's when I noticed it, a small, leather-bound diary peeking out from beneath a stack of magazines on the coffee table. It was a deep burgundy, her initials embossed in gold on the cover. I had seen it before, but I never thought much of it. Melissa had always kept a journal, documenting her thoughts and dreams, but I respected her privacy. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. What could she possibly be writing about that was so important? Without really thinking, I picked it up. The moment my fingers brushed the smooth leather, I felt a wave of apprehension. Should I read it? I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on my conscience. But the nagging feeling inside urged me on. I flipped it open to a random page. The scrawled handwriting instantly recognizable as hers. As I read the first few sentences, my heart sank. The words were filled with emotion, excitement, longing, and a sense of thrill that I had never associated with our life together. I turned to the next page, and the entries became more vivid, painting a picture of someone deeply enthralled, someone who was not me. Then I saw it, his name. Nick, the new neighbor. My stomach dropped. The details began to unfold, each word stabbing deeper into my heart. Melissa described stolen moments spent together, secret glances, and whispered confessions. She wrote about how exhilarating it felt to be around him, how he made her feel alive. Each line felt like a betrayal, a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I could hardly breathe. Time seemed to slow as I read, my heart racing with every revelation. I learned of their clandestine meetings and the way she described him, the excitement in her words, the breathless anticipation of their encounters. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could she do this to us? I had thought our love was strong enough to weather anything, but it felt like a mirage, dissipating before my eyes. Anger surged through me like wildfire, consuming all rational thought. I slammed the diary shut, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream, to confront her, but I couldn't. I needed to think, to process what I had just uncovered. The trust we had built together shattered in an instant, and I felt a hollowness that I had never known before. I stood there, clutching the diary as if it were a ticking time bomb, the truth ready to explode. I looked around the living room, the familiar surroundings suddenly feeling foreign and hostile. Every object held a memory, a reminder of the love we had shared. It all felt tainted now, marred by her deceit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moments I had taken for granted. The laughter, the quiet evenings, the dreams we had shared, all of it felt tainted by her betrayal. My mind raced as I wrestled with a mix of emotions, betrayal, anger, confusion. How could I face her? How could I ever trust her again? In the darkness, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her just yet. I needed time to formulate a plan. I needed to understand my feelings, to figure out how to cope with the pain that had settled deep in my chest. I felt a flicker of determination. I would not be the victim in this story. I would reclaim my life, but first, I needed to gather my strength. The thought of revenge began to take root, but for now, I let it simmer beneath the surface as I grappled with the reality of the betrayal. The following days blurred into a haze of routine and raw emotion. I found myself retreating further into my work, pouring every ounce of my energy into projects and deadlines. The office became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the reality of my crumbling marriage. I buried myself in spreadsheets and presentations, ignoring the gnawing sensation in my gut that reminded me of Melissa's betrayal. Late nights at the office became the norm. I welcomed the solitude of the empty cubicles, the glow of my computer screen illuminating the darkness around me. The clatter of keyboards and the faint hum of the air conditioning were my only companions. I could almost convince myself that I was thriving, that this was a temporary phase one could push through. Yet, deep down, the pain of her infidelity gnawed at me like an unrelenting parasite. During the rare moments I returned home, the silence felt suffocating. I would walk through the front door, expecting to see Melissa waiting with a warm smile, but instead, I was met with an empty house that echoed her absence. The very air felt thick with unspoken words, and the shadows in the corners of our home felt ominous, reminding me of the love that had been tainted. I tried to sleep, but the images of her with Nick haunted my mind, replaying like a cruel movie on a never-ending loop. As days turned into weeks, I knew I needed an outlet, something to channel my anger and heartbreak. That's when I found myself in the gym for the first time in years. I had always kept a casual interest in fitness, but now it has become my lifeline. The weight room, filled with grunting bodies and the rhythmic clang of metal, transformed into a sanctuary where I could unleash my fury. I threw myself into every workout with reckless abandon. The burn in my muscles became a welcome distraction from the emotional pain that threatened to overwhelm me. I lifted weights until my arms trembled and my chest heaved, each representative a small victory against the darkness lurking in my mind. I focused on the mirror, watching as my reflection morphed into someone stronger, both physically and mentally. Each drop of sweat felt like a cleansing, washing away the hurt I carried inside. At first, I was alone in this struggle, but eventually, I crossed paths with others who shared my experience. I met Larry, a guy in his mid-30s with a similar story. He too was nursing wounds from a betrayal. We connected over our shared pain, exchanging stories as we lifted weights and ran on treadmills. His presence was comforting, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this battle. Together, we began to forge a bond, leaning on each other during our darkest moments. But the relief I found in the gym was fleeting. There were still moments when the weight of my reality crashed down on me, suffocating and relentless. I would find myself staring into space, lost in thought, the world around me fading into a blur. I would remember Melissa's laughter, the warmth of her embrace, and the love that had once felt unbreakable. The betrayal would rear its ugly head, and I would feel that familiar sting of anger rise within me. Despite the catharsis I found in physical exertion, I realized that it was merely a band-aid on a much deeper wound. The moments of strength in the gym were often followed by evenings spent in solitude, where I wrestled with my thoughts. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of my shattered trust haunting me. I couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy, the nagging question of why I wasn't enough for Melissa. As the days wore on, the idea of revenge began to take shape in the recesses of my mind. I didn't want to be a passive victim. I wanted to reclaim my power. I would think about what it would mean to confront her, to expose the affair in a way that would sting. The desire to hurt her, to make her feel the same agony she had inflicted upon me, grew stronger with each passing day. Yet, amidst this turmoil, there was a flicker of doubt. Would revenge truly bring me the closure I sought, or would it only deepen my pain? I wrestled with this internal conflict, grappling with my emotions. The anger was intoxicating, but I couldn't help but wonder if it would ultimately lead to my destruction. In the gym, I pushed myself harder, not just to escape but to prepare. I wanted to be ready for whatever lay ahead, whether it was a confrontation with Melissa or a plan to expose her betrayal. With every drop of sweat and every rep, I built not only my body but also a resolve that began to solidify within me. I was determined to rise from the ashes of this heartbreak, to transform my pain into something powerful. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew I couldn't let Melissa's betrayal define me. As I left the gym that night, exhausted but exhilarated, I felt a flicker of hope ignited within me. I was ready to confront the demons of my past, and whatever happened next, I would face it head on. The gym had become my refuge, a place where I could lose myself in the rhythm of my workouts and temporarily escape the gnawing pain of Melissa's betrayal. I found comfort in the predictable routines, the clang of weights, the hum of cardio machines, and the smell of sweat mingling with the faint scent of disinfectant. It was a world where I could push my body to its limits and shed the emotional baggage that weighed me down. One evening, while I was in the middle of an intense circuit training session, I noticed a guy working out nearby. He was tall and muscular, with short cropped hair and a focused expression. He seemed to be going through a similar routine, lifting weights with determination, his brow furrowed in concentration. But there was something different about him. As I glanced at him between sets, I sensed a quiet intensity that intrigued me. After finishing my last set, I wiped the sweat from my brow and took a moment to catch my breath. I noticed that the guy was now resting on a bench, and something compelled me to approach him. Maybe it was the shared atmosphere of the gym, or perhaps I was just looking for an outlet to vent my frustrations. Whatever the reason, I walked over, my heart racing with a mix of nerves and curiosity. "Hey, mind if I sit here?" I asked, gesturing toward the bench. He looked up and smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from his eyes. "Not at all, go ahead. I'm Larry." "Daniel," I replied, taking a seat beside him. We exchanged a few pleasantries about our workouts, but I sensed that both of us were wrestling with something deeper beneath the surface. As the conversation flowed, I couldn't help but notice the way Larry's eyes would occasionally darken, hinting at a hidden pain that echoed my own. It was as if we were two ships passing in the night, each navigating our storms while yearning for a connection that transcended the gym walls. Eventually, I found the courage to broach the topic that had been weighing heavily on my mind. "You know, I've been coming here for a while now, and I can't help but feel like I'm trying to outrun something," I confessed. "Have you ever felt that way?" Larry nodded, his expression shifting to one of understanding. "Yeah, I know that feeling all too well. I went through a rough patch myself not too long ago. My wife cheated on me." The admission hung in the air between us, raw and heavy. In that moment, I felt an immediate bond forming, a shared experience that gave me a sense of relief. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, sincerity lacing my voice. "I'm going through something similar. I just found out my wife has been seeing someone else." We exchanged stories, each revelation shedding light on our respective struggles. Larry told me about the betrayal he had experienced, the disbelief that had washed over him when he discovered his wife's affair. His voice trembled with emotion as he recounted the day he found her in a compromising position with another man, a moment that shattered his world. "I felt like I was living in a nightmare," he said, shaking his head. "It was as if everything I thought I knew about our life together was a lie." I could relate all too well. I shared the details of finding Melissa's diary, how it had unveiled a world of deceit I had never imagined. "I thought we were happy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now, I feel like I don't even know her." Larry listened intently, nodding as I spoke. His empathy was palpable, a balm for my wounded heart. "It's a tough pill to swallow," he said softly. "But you're not alone in this. I went through the same feelings of betrayal and confusion. It's okay to feel angry and lost." Our conversation deepened, delving into the complexities of love and trust, the pain of infidelity, and the struggle to reclaim our lives. We bonded over our shared experiences, finding solace in each other's stories. It felt refreshing to speak openly about our emotions, to connect with someone who truly understood the turmoil brewing inside me. As our workouts began to synchronize, we started to push each other, both physically and emotionally. Larry encouraged me to try new exercises. And in return, I shared my tips on improving my technique. Each session became a cathartic release, a way to channel our pain into something tangible. We also began to meet outside of the gym, grabbing coffee and sharing more about our lives. Larry revealed that he had once been a successful entrepreneur, but the betrayal had derailed him. "I lost my motivation," he confessed. "But I'm slowly finding my way back. It's a process." His journey resonated with me. I could see a flicker of hope in his eyes, a determination to rebuild despite the heartbreak. I began to realize that perhaps this connection was more than just a friendship, it was a lifeline. Through our discussions, I found clarity in my situation. Larry's perspective helped me see that I didn't have to be a victim of my circumstances. I could choose to rise above the pain and take control of my life. Each shared laugh and moment of vulnerability solidified our bond, and I knew I had found an ally in this battle against heartache. As the weeks passed, Larry and I became inseparable. We encouraged each other to face our emotions head-on, to confront our pain rather than bury it beneath the surface. I had finally found someone who understood, and in turn, I began to understand myself a little better. Our friendship became a source of strength, a reminder that healing was possible even in the aftermath of betrayal. Together, we forged a path toward recovery, discovering that the weight of our shared struggles could be lifted when we leaned on one another. In the gym and beyond, we found hope in the unlikeliest of places, united by our desire to reclaim our lives and move forward into an uncertain but promising future. As my friendship with Larry deepened, it became a source of inspiration and motivation. We shared our pain and frustrations, but slowly, the discussions shifted from mere coping to a plan for revenge. We were both raw with emotion, and while we understood that our feelings were valid, we also knew we needed an outlet for our rage. One evening after a particularly grueling workout, we sat in a nearby cafe, nursing cups of black coffee. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow that felt almost contradictory to the coldness we felt in our hearts. Larry leaned in, his eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and determination. "Daniel, I've been thinking," he began, his voice low and conspiratorial. "What if we did something about Melissa and Nick? Something that would make them feel the pain they've inflicted on us?" I felt a rush of adrenaline at the idea. Until that moment, I had been trapped in a cycle of sorrow and anger, but now, a spark of something darker ignited within me. "What do you have in mind?" I asked, intrigued yet apprehensive. Larry outlined a scheme that, while audacious, felt exhilarating. We could create a situation that exposes them. Something that forces them to confront their choices in a public way. It has to be something that shakes them to their core. He leaned back in his chair, a devilish grin spreading across his face. "What if we staged a scenario where they think their affair is going to be revealed?" As he spoke, I felt the weight of my anguish morph into a sense of empowerment. I could visualize it, the look on Melissa's face as her secret was laid bare, the humiliation she would feel, the realization that she could no longer hide from the consequences of her actions. It sent a thrill through me, one that I hadn't felt since discovering her betrayal. We spent hours brainstorming the details, our laughter echoing through the cafe as we crafted scenarios that ranged from the ridiculous to the intricate. We settled on a plan that involved a fake event, something elaborate enough to lure Melissa and Nick into a trap where we could catch them off guard and make them face the fallout of their choices. "Let's host a gathering," Larry suggested, his enthusiasm infectious. "We could invite some mutual friends and make it seem like a big deal. We'll drop hints that there might be some shocking revelations during the evening." The idea took root. I imagined the scene, our friends mingling, drinks flowing, and in the midst of it all, Melissa and Nick oblivious to the storm that was brewing. The anticipation of their reaction fueled my desire for revenge. I wanted to see Melissa's face when she realized that the life she was building with Nick was about to crumble. It felt justified in a way, a means of reclaiming the power she had stripped from me. As we finalized the details, I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This plan was our way of taking back control, of turning the tables on those who had wronged us. In our minds, it was not just about revenge, it was about closure, about making them understand the pain they had caused. But then, just as our plans were taking shape, a piece of news jolted me back to reality. I was at the gym with Larry one evening when I overheard a conversation between two members, their voices low but unmistakable. "Did you hear? Melissa and Nick are moving to another city next month," one of them said. "I guess they're ready for a fresh start." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I turned to Larry, my heart racing. "Did you hear that? They're moving away." Larry's brow furrowed as he processed the information. "That changes everything," he said, his tone serious. "If they leave, they'll escape the consequences of their actions. We can't let that happen." The urgency of the situation sent our plans into overdrive. The thought of Melissa and Nick starting anew, free from the repercussions of their betrayal, ignited a fire in my gut. The urgency to act became paramount. We had to execute our plan before they slipped away without facing the fallout. "We need to move fast," I said, determination seeping into my voice. "We can't let them get away with this. We have to make sure they know we won't be silenced." Larry nodded, his eyes flashing with resolve. "Let's speed up our timeline. We can't let them leave without facing the music. This is our chance." In the days that followed, we became consumed by our plan. Each moment was filled with frantic energy as we finalized the details, our minds racing with possibilities. The thought of Melissa and Nick facing our carefully orchestrated revelation felt exhilarating. It was a twisted sense of justice, a chance to reclaim the narrative of our lives. As we plotted, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that revenge might not be the answer. But the anger, the betrayal, it felt too strong to ignore. This was my chance to confront the pain head-on, to expose Melissa's betrayal in a way that would resonate. We were on the brink of something big, and with each passing day, my resolve strengthened. The countdown to their departure loomed over us, and I felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. It was time to make our move. As the days rolled on, the anticipation of our revenge plan grew. Larry and I worked tirelessly, fine-tuning every detail, envisioning the moment when Melissa and Nick would finally face the consequences of their betrayal. The thrill of it all was intoxicating. It felt as though I had a newfound purpose, a mission to reclaim the power that had been so cruelly stripped from me. Yet, beneath the surface, a wave of unease began to wash over me. The closer we got to executing our plan, the more I found myself grappling with nagging doubts. I couldn't ignore the growing uncertainty that gnawed at me during quiet moments, the times when I'd catch my reflection in the gym mirrors or lie awake at night, my mind racing. Was this truly what I wanted? Would inflicting pain on Melissa and Nick provide the satisfaction I was seeking, or would it only serve to deepen my hurt? Amid our planning, I often found myself standing in the gym, my fists clenched around the weights, lost in thought. Each repetition felt like a countdown to the confrontation we had orchestrated, but the exhilaration of our plot was steadily giving way to something more somber. I could envision Melissa's face as she realized what we were doing. The confusion and betrayal etched into her features. But then the image morphed into something else, the potential for regret. Would I truly find satisfaction in her humiliation, or would it merely amplify the emptiness I felt inside? During one of our training sessions, I finally voiced my concerns to Larry. We were cooling down after an intense workout, our bodies drenched in sweat, when I turned to him, uncertainty clouding my judgment. Larry, do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake? I mean, what if this doesn't bring us the closure we're looking for? He paused, his brow furrowing in contemplation. What do you mean? He asked, genuinely curious. I don't know, I replied, struggling to articulate my thoughts. I just keep thinking about how this revenge plan might not change anything for me. It's like I'm just adding more fuel to the fire. What if it only makes me feel worse? Larry leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, and nodded slowly. I get that. Revenge can be a double-edged sword. We think it'll make us feel better, but it can also trap us in a cycle of anger and resentment. It's like pouring salt on an open wound. His words resonated with me, sparking a flicker of doubt that I hadn't been able to shake off. Exactly, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I want to confront them, to make them understand how they've hurt us, but I don't want to lose myself in the process. I don't want to become someone I'm not. Larry's expression softened as he contemplated my concerns. It's normal to have doubts. We're both in a vulnerable place right now. But maybe instead of revenge, we could focus on healing. We can find ways to move forward without tearing each other apart. The idea of healing felt foreign. I had been so consumed by my anger and desire for revenge that I had overlooked the possibility of moving on. But how could I possibly heal when Melissa and Nick were out there, living their lives without consequence? Larry, it's hard to think about healing when I feel like they're just getting away with everything. I admitted, frustration bubbling to the surface. How do we reconcile that? He sighed, running a hand through his hair, and said, I think it's about reclaiming our power. Revenge can feel like taking control, but true strength lies in moving on. It's about saying, I won't let this define me. I considered his words, the weight of them settling in my chest. The thought of letting go of my anger felt daunting, like I was giving Melissa and Nick a pass for their actions. But at the same time, I had to acknowledge that clinging to revenge would only bind me to my pain. Maybe we can still confront them, but in a way that allows us to heal instead of just causing harm, I suggested hesitantly. What if we set boundaries and express how their actions affected us without resorting to a public spectacle? Larry smiled, his expression brightening as he saw a glimmer of hope in my words. That could be a way to find closure. We can show them that we're not victims anymore, that we're moving forward. It's about taking our lives back. I felt a surge of relief wash over me, the burden of doubt beginning to lift. It was still a delicate line to walk. The temptation for revenge lingered like an old friend, whispering promises of satisfaction. But as I looked at Larry, I realized that I didn't have to walk this path alone. Let's reframe our plan, I said, newfound determination coloring my voice. Let's do this for ourselves, not just as a reaction to their betrayal. We'll take control of our narratives. As we left the gym that evening, the weight of our decisions hung in the air, but the prospect of healing began to take shape. We were no longer two men caught in a cycle of vengeance. We were reclaiming our power, ready to confront the past without letting it dictate our future. It was a small but significant shift, one that promised a path toward healing instead of an abyss of pain. The days flew by, each one tinged with urgency as I learned more about Melissa and Nick's impending move. It was a constant weight on my chest, a reminder that time was slipping through my fingers like sand. I found myself obsessively checking my phone, scrolling through social media for any hint of their plans, and my heart raced with the thought of losing her forever. One evening, after a particularly intense workout with Larry, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel as the headlights pierced the darkening sky. The thought of Melissa starting a new life without me churned in my stomach. A twisted mix of anger and desperation. I needed to act, I had to try and stop them before it was too late. As I sat there, the reality of my situation washed over me like a cold shower. Melissa and Nick were planning to leave town, likely never to return. The thought of her packing her bags and preparing to build a future with someone else filled me with dread. I couldn't let that happen without at least attempting to reach her. I had to try to make her see that her decision was a mistake. A fleeting moment of passion that could easily lead to regret. The next day, I found myself outside her apartment complex, my heart racing as I rehearsed what I would say. What if she didn't want to hear me out? What if Nick was with her? My mind swirled with possibilities, and for a moment, I contemplated backing out. But the image of Melissa's smile, her laughter, and the memories of our life together surged through me, igniting a fire of determination. As I approached her door, I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. I knocked, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear footsteps approaching, and my breath hitched in my throat. When the door swung open, my heart dropped. Melissa stood there, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Daniel?" she asked, taken aback. "What are you doing here?" I need to talk to you," I stammered, my words tumbling out in a rush. "Can we please sit down for a minute?" She hesitated but finally stepped aside, allowing me to enter. As I walked into her living room, the familiarity of the space struck me. It felt like a lifetime ago that we'd laughed together in this very spot. But now, the atmosphere was heavy, charged with the unspoken words hanging in the air. "Is everything okay?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I heard you're moving. I wanted to see if we could talk about it." Her expression softened slightly, but the tension remained palpable. "I didn't think you'd care," she said quietly. Avoiding my gaze. "I do care, Melissa," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I still love you, and I don't want to lose you like this." She looked at me, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions, sadness, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Daniel, I've made my decision. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "You're leaving with him. How can you say it's complicated? You're choosing to be with someone else." Melissa flinched at my words, her expression tightening. "It's not that simple. You don't know what I've been feeling. We've been drifting apart for a while now, and Nick, he makes me feel alive again. I thought you'd understand." Her words hit me like a slap, each one a reminder of the chasm that had formed between us. "But you didn't even try to talk to me about it," I protested. "We could have worked through this together." "I didn't know how to," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you." The weight of her admission hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the walls closing in, and desperation clawed at me. "Please, Melissa, don't do this. We had something real, something worth fighting for." Tears glistened in her eyes as she shook her head. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I am. But I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I need to do this for myself." At that moment, I felt a crushing sense of helplessness wash over me. I had come here hoping to persuade her to stay, to fight for our relationship, but instead, I felt like I was losing her all over again. The realization that I couldn't change her mind settled like a stone in my stomach. "Is there anything I can say that will make you reconsider?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. She paused, looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and resolve. "I don't think so. I've made my choice, Daniel. It's what I believe is best for me right now." As her words sunk in, the truth hit me like a cold wave. No amount of pleading or reasoning would change her heart. The love we once shared had become a relic of the past, and in that moment, I understood that no matter how much I wanted to hold on, I was losing her. "Then I guess this is it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I hope you find what you're looking for." As I turned to leave, I felt a heavy weight lift from my chest. I had tried to stop her from fighting for us, but in the end, I realized that holding onto the past would only keep me tethered to pain. I needed to let go, to accept that Melissa had made her choice, even if it meant facing my heartache. In the days that followed, I grappled with the reality of my situation. I had confronted Melissa, hoping to change her mind, but instead, I was left with a deeper sense of loss. The rush of emotions I had felt while plotting revenge seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the understanding that vengeance wouldn't heal my wounds. I found myself wandering through the city, my mind clouded with thoughts of what could have been. Each corner I turned held echoes of our shared moments, the laughter, the quiet evenings spent together, the plans we had made. But now, those memories felt like chains, anchoring me to a past that I couldn't reclaim. Larry reached out to me, sensing my struggles. We met up for our usual training sessions, but this time, the energy felt different. I was distracted, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and regret. During a particularly intense workout, I felt the weight of the weights in my hands. But it was the burden of my heart that felt the heaviest. After our session, we grabbed a quick bite at a diner. As we sat across from each other, Larry studied my face, concern etched in his features. "You okay, man? You seem off." I sighed, staring into my coffee. I confronted Melissa, and it didn't go how I hoped. I thought maybe I could change her mind, but now I feel more lost than ever. Larry leaned back, processing my words. "It's tough, man, but you have to remember that you can't force someone to feel something they don't. You can't control their decisions." "I know," I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. "But I thought we had something real. I just can't understand how she could walk away." "People change," Larry said softly. "And sometimes they make choices that seem selfish, but maybe they're trying to find themselves. You can't carry that weight for her. It's not your fault." His words lingered in the air, and I felt a flicker of understanding. I had been so consumed by my desire for revenge and my anger toward Melissa that I had overlooked the fact that she was struggling too. She wasn't the only one hurting, I had also been navigating my pain, my loss. As I sipped my coffee, I began to see the situation more clearly. I had been so focused on inflicting pain on Melissa and Nick that I hadn't considered the possibility of letting go. Revenge would not heal my wounds, it would only deepen them. I needed to find a way to reclaim my life without being anchored by resentment. "I think I need to focus on myself," I admitted, a sense of clarity washing over me. "I can't keep allowing this situation to control my happiness. I need to let go of the anger and find a way to move on." Larry nodded, a supportive smile breaking through. "That's a great step. Healing takes time, but you'll get there. You've already taken the first step by recognizing what you need." As we finished our meal, I felt a sense of lightness creeping into my heart. I realized that while Melissa had chosen her path, I had the power to choose mine. Revenge would not be the answer, it would only lead me further down a dark path of bitterness. In the days that followed, I began to take small steps toward healing. I focused on my workouts, pouring my energy into rebuilding my strength, both physically and emotionally. After the emotional turmoil of confronting Melissa and the subsequent realization that revenge would only lead to more pain, I began to focus on myself in ways I never thought possible. The thought of reclaiming my life invigorated me, and I felt a newfound determination to embrace change. I started by diving into my work. For the longest time, I had felt stagnant in my career, confined to a routine that offered little satisfaction. But now, with the memories of Melissa and Nick fading into the background, I found myself looking at my job with fresh eyes. I enrolled in online courses to enhance my skills and even ventured into learning new software that had intrigued me for years but felt too daunting to tackle. With each completed module, I felt a sense of accomplishment building within me. I began to see the possibilities of where I could take my career. There were promotions I had once thought out of reach, and I started setting new goals. The more I learned, the more excited I became about the future. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to my past relationship but rather to the person I was becoming. I also took the plunge into building new relationships. At first, it was a bit nerve-wracking to think about meeting new people after the heartbreak I had experienced. But Larry continued to be a strong support, encouraging me to get out and socialize. We started joining local events and meetups, and I found myself laughing again, something I thought had disappeared from my life. One evening, at a networking event, I met Sarah. She was vibrant, with an infectious laugh that lit up the room. We clicked immediately, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. It felt so refreshing to connect with someone who had no ties to my past, someone who encouraged me to be my best self. As we talked, I began to feel the stirrings of hope. The barriers I had built around my heart started to crumble, and I allowed myself to envision the possibility of a future filled with laughter and love once more. Through my journey of self-discovery, I also began to understand the importance of forgiveness, not just for Melissa but for myself as well. I had held on to resentment, thinking it was a way to cope with the pain. But I realized that forgiveness was a gift I could give myself, a way to free my heart from the weight of anger. I reached out to Melissa one last time, wanting to clear the air. It felt necessary to have an honest conversation, to share my thoughts and feelings as we both moved on with our lives. We agreed to meet at a cafe that held memories of better days. When I saw her, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me, but I also felt a profound sense of relief knowing that this chapter was finally closing. "Melissa," I started, my voice steady. "I just want to say that I've come to terms with everything. I wish things had been different, but I understand that we both needed to make choices for our happiness." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry for the hurt I caused you, Daniel. I never wanted to break your heart." "I know," I replied, my heart softening. "We've both made mistakes, but I believe we can learn from them. I've been focusing on myself, and I hope you find what you're looking for, too." We talked about our lives, our choices, and our hopes for the future. It felt cathartic to finally release the pain we had both carried. As we parted ways, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had let go of the bitterness, freeing myself to move forward. With the weight of the past finally lifted, I embraced the idea of a new beginning. My life had taken unexpected turns, but those very twists had led me to rediscover who I was. I threw myself into my work, feeling more engaged and driven than ever. The projects I once dreaded became growth opportunities, and I began to take on leadership roles that scared me in the best way. My relationship with Sarah blossomed. We explored the city together, discovering hidden gems and sharing laughter that echoed long into the night. Every moment spent with her felt like a celebration of life. I found joy in small things again. A simple walk in the park, spontaneous road trips, and quiet evenings filled with shared dreams. As I moved forward, I realized that I could carry the lessons from my past without allowing them to define me. I had transformed pain into motivation, and heartbreak into resilience. Life was unpredictable, but I was ready to embrace it. In moments of reflection, I would think of Melissa and the life we had once shared. I held no resentment, only gratitude for the memories that had shaped me. I had learned the value of love, trust, and ultimately, the importance of letting go. As the seasons changed, I found myself standing at crossroads again, but this time, I felt empowered. I was no longer the man who had sought revenge or clung to the remnants of a shattered relationship. I was Daniel, a man reborn, ready to embrace whatever the future held. With a heart open to new experiences, I knew that life was full of possibilities. I had let go of the past and was excited to see where my new path would lead. As I walked forward, I felt a sense of freedom, a newfound understanding that life goes on, and so did I.